This panel, I guess we don't have a lot of AI enthusiasts here. This panel is designed around the question of AI in industrialized construction. And the question that we're addressing is, what will it take for AI to become a trusted layer in the housing delivery process? And I'll frame it for you. Like, I'm looking at some people like they've never thought about using AI for IC or what the connection is. If you look at the building process, the industrialized construction building process, from site assessment all the way up front to ongoing commissioning at the very end and everything in between, there's like this 12, 13, 14 distinct steps, distinct systems that all in an ideal world would be interconnected with each other, right? You could imagine having a drone that flies a site and takes pictures and uploads that to a database, and then you have a designer who's designing something on that piece of land, and so on down the chain. And everything is connected by one big data lake. When you think about that, and I actually had a slide, we're not doing slides in this conference, so I can't show you the slide, but it's 10 years old, and it was like, I designed this really pretty, and this is this piece of software that had to exist that didn't exist yet. One of the reasons that IC is expensive is because coordination between those steps is hard. You have to pay someone to do it. It's easy to mess it up. The really big promise of AI in industrialized construction is making that coordination easy, making it cheap, making it fast, making it flawless, making it like mistakeless, right? Now, we're clearly not there, and I'm going to start off today by, well, I have some fantastic people on the stage with me. I have an AI software founder and CEO, Aaron. I've got Franklin Fernandez, who is an owner for Navy. And then I've got Jay, who is with NIBS, National Institute of Building Sciences, and he's going to talk, he knows a lot about standards and AI as well. So I'm going to start this AI question with Aaron. This system that I'm kind of imagining, would be really awesome to have. Why don't we have that yet? And is it even possible to do that?
Yeah, so the short answer is you will. And the longer answer is this industry's later to the game in AI. So there's a progression, and it's a fairly well-worn progression that has to do with phases of automation and then phases of coordination. The dream of AI in this industry is coordination without consensus. And coordination without consensus essentially implies a network of agents that are able to work with each other at a level of intelligence that's not been possible before. So if you look at how that ends up looking, what I'd recommend is take a look at how software engineers build software today. So the way software engineers built software 3-4 years ago was very different than the way they do it today. So software engineers were the first ones in the AI adoption curve for a very specific reason. They built a ton of code, and so the models benefited a lot from their work. But if you look at a senior software engineer today, what they do is they craft very precise plans, and then they deploy a set of agents that are going to go take hours, days to complete sets of work that are going to provide and build software applications. These could be enterprise software applications, desktop applications. But that's how they work, because the agents are sophisticated and precise, and the software developers understand how the agents are going to work and what they're going to deliver. So that level of agentic work is coming for other industries, and it's already happened in other sectors. So I look at the role of a developer, let's say, a real estate developer, and ask the question, how much of the $200 billion a year that are conducted and transacted in soft costs, in pre-development, all the stuff that happens before you break ground, how much of that work is going to shift from documents to agents? And what happens if that work shifts from documents to agents? What changes in the industry? And I would say that we're in the very, very beginning of a transition towards that reality. That's not going to take all that long, and technically, which I think is the basis of your question, technically there's no reason why it can't happen.
That's exciting. So the future is here. It's just not evenly distributed.
It's just not distributed to this industry yet.
available.
It's available in other industries. This industry, there's a lot of moving parts. It's a complex industry. There's a lot of different players. 80% of housing in the U.S. is built by teams of 10 or smaller. It's a small, medium-sized business industry. So it's not, in other industries, you have full control over aspects of it, pharmaceutical, energy, et cetera. And so there's very data-rich. Getting to automation is a faster path. Control over automation is a faster path. Getting to coordination can be done top-down. This is not a top-down industry. This is a bottoms-up industry. And so the adoption of these types of workflows will just take a little longer.
Now, that's a really interesting statement, that it's a bottoms-up versus tops-down industry.
Although I will say, I think there are some things that need to be driven from the top down, from the owner, because if we don't establish them as protocols to share securely but openly based on roles, then we haven't laid the groundwork for us to be able to leverage the AI that's available.
That's exactly where I was leading him. Because he's representing a very large owner. So, and the follow-up question to that, Frank, is what do you foresee the problems being with trusting AI from the government's perspective?
Yeah, so I've got three main concerns from the owner's perspective, and so you already talked about one of them. The data that we've got, how do we secure that, but have it open enough where we're able to allow access based on roles? So if we have a standard, we want to have it as a available and open standard, building model, design, whatever that criteria is within certain tolerances, and then provided to our partners, because the vast majority of our work, 100% of our construction work, is done by our industry partners. So we want to be able to leverage that if we're going to do it in an IC world, repeatable and programmatically over the years, right? Because that's the real power of it. If we don't capitalize on that, then we've lost the money and the true capability of IC. The second thing we have to consider, especially in an engineering world, is the human in the loop. So how do we leverage AI, set it loose, but not set it loose? And so said another way, how does a human in the loop who might have to take engineering liability, there's cost factors, but when AI writes an email for me, I don't let it send the email. I look at the email before I send it, and I'm the one that pushes send, right? So that's the same type of thing with the design, the construction, the bills of materials. Just like when I was using Excel 30 years ago when it was relatively new, I looked at the result at the bottom, and if the result wasn't right, I looked at whether or not it was adding up all the numbers I thought it was adding up. So AI is going to kind of be the same way, where we in industry, with our instinct, with our intuition, with our experience, we need to look at the results that AI is providing and make sure it's within the parameters that we expect. And some of that can be assisted with AI, but my fundamental belief is that human in the loop is a critical factor.
Well, can I follow up with you on that? Because does keeping a human accountable actually solve the owner's problem, or does it merely move the problem to a person who may be signing work they can't independently verify?
Well, they're going to have to independently verify it. I mean, they're going to have to verify it, and so that's the challenge with AI, is because sometimes AI kind of goes into a black box and then you get a result. And do I send that email without checking that the references in my email are actually accurate, valid? We need to check it. We need to check it as a professional industry. I don't see that we can completely remove the humans in the loop, the professionals that we have, completely, at least the current state of AI. And it may be a while. There may be some things that end up being automated. And I make a differentiation when I talk AI. There's a huge difference to me between automation, which is essentially just calculating numbers, right? Producing a result. AI, which is generative, right? Where it's coming up, it's taking a lot of data and generating something, a document, a result. that in some ways is creative or summarizing something, AI absolutely needs to be reviewed and validated by the human. I just don't see, I mean, there's going to be some fundamental things that might be automated, but with AI where it's generating things creatively, that needs to be reviewed in my perspective. But the third point I was going to make is the results. So the results are going to be important with AI because if we don't have realistic, repeatable, so if I go into AI and I get one result, but the next day Jay goes in with the exact same prompt, exact same data, and he gets a different result, I think that's going to undermine the credibility within the AI system within some parameters, right? Because, AI might have learned something in the day since it was prompted from one to the other. But it needs to be relatively repeatable, relatively predictable, and then with that human in the loop, be able to validate the results that it's within the parameters that we can proceed with.
Awesome. So Aaron, now that you've heard like the owner's requirements, right, and constraints, what would you change in your system design to satisfy those particular things?
Well, I think our system design was actually designed with those things in mind, because primarily what we're talking about when we talk about trust is what's different about AI systems than traditional deterministic software. So AI is a probabilistic system, which means it doesn't, you don't press a button and it makes a thing. It behaves, it thinks, it reasons, it has a lot of different capabilities. Ultimately, what will make it trustable is the people who are running the AI. They're the ones who have the controls. They're the ones who have the settings. They're the ones who determine how far it's going to go, how fully autonomous it is, where are the checks, where are the humans in the loop. That's all organizational design. So there's a communication that needs to happen. And I believe that the industry and businesses in the industry and groups in the industry, the task is to become very conversant with how AI works, to understand the technology, understand its nuances, understand what it's good at, what it's not good at, what the different constructs are, what's an agent, what's a harness, what's a model, what are skills, what are markdowns, like what are these things? How do they work together? Because that's how you establish a workflow where you can get a predictable and high value result. AI is also very good at running experiments. So all the questions that we're asking, in my mind, turn into, great, what's the first experiment that we're going to try? What's the first experiment? What's the first agent that we're going to build that's going to allow us to try to unpack this a little bit, train the team on what really works and how it functions, and then adjust and change. And this is one of the biggest challenges for the industry, is it'll result in a lot of organizational change, because you'll have people working with agents and responsible for the outcomes and the outputs of those agents and signing off on them. And then their interactions with each other and agents will change. And so the organizational structure, the organizational taking responsibility for how the AI works and how to deploy it, these are tools. AI for the first time gives the IC industry the ability to make its own software. This industry can create its own software for the first time. And that's a big shift, because AI is most powerful when it's put in the hands of people who understand the business that they're trying to do. And so if they understand the rules, understand the business, AI is very powerful. If you're just looking for AI to come in and be a panacea, that's not how it ends up working. But I will also say, like, at this point, a lot of the major software providers, because they've gone through these shifts, 50, 75, 100% of the code that they're creating is generated by AI, because they've put in place the constructs and the controls to be able to understand how to move through complex processes and get good results.
Can I add a specific thing maybe that maybe system designers can do is to bridge the gap, I think, between, let's call like amateur users or folks who are first getting into AI and the developers who are building these really complex things and code in the background is what I've seen done, and some developers have done this already, is exposing the thinking of the actual agents or the models. So if an electrical engineer at NAVFAC is working with an agent and is just providing input and getting output, that is a little bit disconcerting because they don't know the math in the process, or they don't know what is that agent doing. So there's either the path of teaching someone what is that, happening in the background, or simply exposing the decision points and the thought process along the way, the logic trace or the logic map, so that then that electrical engineer can say, oh, like it decided based on this code section that this was applicable, and therefore it's calling this out as an issue on the drawings is one use case example. So exposing that thinking is almost like a natural way of bridging the gap between users and the models in the background.
And that's also where the light bulb can go off, because I've seen it happen. Non-software people who have created an agent and then watch someone else interact with the agent and then understand that it's interacting with them because of what they did. So it's because of how they put the knowledge base, the instructions. They're like, oh, I see. And then they'll go back and adjust and make changes. They go, oh, I see how it's responding to this set of questions.
Yeah, and this kind of, I don't know if there's another time to talk about this, but it might be a natural progression here is if we're exposing what the agents are thinking and their reasoning and their decisions, someone might come and say, hey, they made a mistake there. Like, that's not really the way to think about this. So then you can iterate on that agentic structure and the flows. And that iteration is really like the foundation of AI progression. And this should happen at an organizational level either way, but when it comes to AI, it's a critical piece of the process is that learning process and actually like documenting decisions, documenting errors. So the more that now, even if you're not doing AI today, the more that anyone can start to expose the thinking of their people, decisions that are made, and these could be the smallest thing like, oh, hey, like we noticed we didn't have enough chairs for this room, and then we had to bring in more chairs, and that took 20 minutes. Like in facilities management, those tiny things amassed over time, written down and documented, can get mined by AI and plugged back into the system. So
If the data is compiled and stored and accessible
yeah.
to the platform, which is important.
So it's this like area of knowledge management or information management or decision management and actually documenting that allows this iteration and learning process. But that it's not magic. Like it takes us and doing the work of actually putting that down on paper and not just getting stuck in our heads.
That's right.
So I'm going to shift gears to talk a little bit about the plumbing that holds this all together, right? And if you think about it, it's a far-reaching problem with lots of different pieces of. You could think of them as pieces of software that you're interfacing all together. You might think of them as something else, like one big AI process. And, I guess there's many different ways to architect it, but however you're going to connect it all up, we're going to need to coordinate information across owners and designers and contractors. What common standards, Jay, and information structures are the essential building blocks of communicating flawlessly like that?
Yeah, I think yesterday we were talking about, Aaron knows a lot more about the AI-focused data standards, but that's not really something we're thinking about like in the building industry so much. So it's these like convergences of different industries that is challenging, right? So I'm not, as an engineer, out there thinking, what is the AI, data exchange and language protocol? But it's critical to enable AI for our industry. So I think convening folks from other industries could be a huge opportunity for us instead of trying to reinvent the wheel. NIBS is a standards. A piece of our mission is standards, publicly available. But like we should not invent the AI language standard for the housing industry. We should take what's available and leverage that. Maybe create some nuance and guidance for the industry on how to leverage it. But in terms of developing standards around AI, I think we should be careful like what role we sort of assert in that.
Well, Nolan, I like your analogy with plumbing because we're going to have many platforms that all do different things. AutoCAD will have a function, Primavera, scheduling, Microsoft has a suite of products. So there's going to be a lot of different platforms that all have particular roles. So the plumbing that connect them, particularly the data, the protocols that share the data and leverage the data properly between them, I think a little bit of that dust kind of has to settle. On the AI side, I think some other organizations within the AI world are really settling on some protocol standards. But internally in our industry, we need to look at how we do that effectively, securely, and usefully. Like, you know, just because I have a building doesn't mean I get to tap into the electrical without reviews and approvals. And there's got to be some quantity checks, and they got to make sure that my work is done to standards. We're going to have that same type of question on the AI side, where different platforms either come with AI embedded, or we're going to have separate agents or separate platforms or modules, that plugins that will assist with particular actions. But the plumbing that connects it, I think, is going to be really important. And I think I'm waiting for the dust to settle a little bit on how that looks for our industry.
Okay, thank you. Yeah, and I'm going to attempt to pull a thread here from earlier. And this is not it's not going to be a point about AI standards, but about standards in general. We've had this conversation this morning and a little bit yesterday about the idea of a standard design. We can call them standard constraints. We can call it some sort of standard, but let's call this the module, the box. I want to kind of make an argument that the IP today, and maybe soon or moving forward, is not the box design. The IP is the intelligence that we generate as an organization around how we execute on that box. So the new IP is intelligence. It's not design, at least in this industry, I would argue. And how we leverage that box, for lack of better terms for now. So the standard potentially being an open standard, like imagine if we're able to layer on top of that, let's say it's rich with data about what all the options are for materials, all the options are for different construction methods, interconnections that are at a minimal level standardized. We'll call it standard, but imagine what we can do with AI on top of that. That's what other industries are doing, is they have open sourced a lot of pieces and parts of the industry that everyone kind of agrees on anyway, and then they built on top of that.
Excellent. Now, last night over drinks, Aaron, you were talking a little bit about maybe we don't need plumbing. Maybe agents can get it all done. Can you tell us more about that?
Well, I mean, we have plumbing. It's the internet, right? So the internet is widely distributed, is very functional and useful. And so I think we kind of view agents as more of a distributed network than a centralized plumbing system. So the good news is there's been so much work that's been done around some of these difficult issues like benchmarking and governance and IP. These are things that have happened in other industries. There's a lot of precedents you can follow. I was at a summit last summer at MIT around AI governance, and I was the only person from housing or development there. Everybody else was from energy or government or people who were doing, large-scale AI deployments. We are early days in this industry, but we will need things like what is a benchmark, what is a quality agent in this industry. So if I'm gonna use an agent that understands building systems, and I'm gonna connect it to an agent that understands, like we're doing this in Washington State right now, where affordable housing developers can go to an agent and they can evaluate different building systems that are available in the state against different financial instruments that are available in the state versus different policy, by right development policies that they can leverage to essentially do feasibility on a parcel. So if I'm gonna do that and I'm gonna look at different agents that have different capabilities, how do I know whether they're trustable? How do I know whether they're high performing? How do I know that the information's up to date? These are all standards that need to be developed. Things like benchmarking, things like what do we do with all the data that comes out of these agents? Is there some type of repository that's in the public trust that we can query and learn from? So these are all emerging, they're just happening right now. This data, this layer of data, because you're right, it is the intelligence that is the core asset that's being produced here. And it's visible and accessible and usable for the first time. So within that construct, what are the structures that make sense for us to do things like have IP governance, like have best practices around agent development and deployment that understand performance and security? How can I have trust in an agent from a vendor that I've never worked with before? Is it because it's got 4 stars? Is it because someone gave it a good, I don't know. These are all questions that'll be answered.
Need to be answered.
Yep.
And so it's a fascinating idea that we have all these agents, and the agents are going to do all the bits and pieces. So we're living in a post-software world at that point, right?
Well, I turn to the fact that it's an empowering, enabling software world. You can make the software, right? This is the first time that the tools have been abstracted to the level, and because they're probabilistic systems, you can make agents. That means you can make software. So if you can make an agent and you can make an agent that connects to another agent, now you've built a system. And so in this industry, we're talking about housing delivery as a system. This is a system. Agents communicating with each other is a very available, straightforward pathway towards enabling a housing delivery system. Decentralized, no centralized backbone, with the ability for anyone in the industry to create an agent. And then you need that layer of trust. So and that layer of trust will start with folks doing business with people they've done business with before. And so, oh, great, you've got an agent that'll do that. That's so helpful. I have an agent that'll do this. Let's have them talk to each other. Oh, that saved us a ton on this project.
Yeah, I've got an example. So, talk about trust. We've got agents that right now, because we use the UFCs, but codes, city and county codes, same way. We've got agents that'll review the design for UFC compliance, right? And they're starter agents. I mean, we're working out the kinks and seeing how we're building that trust as we kind of leverage them and see what the results are. Again, are the results validatable, repeatable? Can they give the insight to the human who's getting the output to make sure the correct data and the prompting has been done correctly? So we're working through some of those things right now, but as we build that trust, we're going to have these agents that are doing these things, and we'll have the designer run those agents before they even submit it to the government, because that's going to tell them what they missed or what they didn't miss, and they're going to have their own agents that maybe do some other things on cost efficiency or energy efficiency or other things. So there may be agents or a combination of agents that are doing some of those things. And then we'll run those similar type of things on the government side just to confirm that what we're receiving, or we'll look at their report if there's a report. So that's the type of way we'll build some trust with some of these agents. And as we get better, we'll let them loose a little bit.
And it's at some point, you'll work with someone who will ask you to deliver the work as an agent and not as a document. At some point, someone will ask you for that deliverable, because it's like, so I worked on, just as an anecdote, in the state of Washington, I worked on the starter home plan, which was financed by the Housing Finance Commission, to try and answer the question of how can we create a supply of starter homes in the state of Washington. And we produced an incredibly detailed, thorough, exhaustive plan that included offsite methods, new financial innovation, how to change rules around parcel sizes, how to change rules around how offsite's governed. And the result was a PDF that was that big. And who read it? You know what I mean? Like, it was fantastic in terms of what it said. What people want to understand is, what does it mean for me? So what does this 200-page document, what do I do with this? And agents are fantastic at that. Context, understanding, interpreting, making things actionable. They're fantastic at that work. And it's going to move into a place where that's going to be more of an expectation, just because of the value of the delivery. If I deliver you an agent, it's much higher value than if I deliver you a document.
Mm-hmm. I'll give another example. Frank and I actually finished up a project in March, and the end of that project was to put together findings, recommendations, AI roadmap, planning. Same thing. I think we result like 70, 80-page document with results from product testing, vendor testing, everything in there. That's a lot to comb through. So we included the attachment to a PDF, but also a link to an agent that he could just click on and ask whatever he wanted of that document. So it's within, a secure location. The agent's built so that that data is not exposed. So this is happening. And part of many firms, like delivery of findings, recommendations, intelligence can be published in the form of an agent. Yeah.
And this is where the compounding learning loops happen. Because if you drop a PDF on someone's desk, that's it. You have no idea what happens with it. You don't know what people did with it. You have no idea the utility of it. It's not reusable. The agent suddenly, I understand, I have analytics about what people did with that. The agent will learn, it'll adjust, it'll get better. The next agent will improve. This is the notion, like, how do we get away from starting every project from scratch? Right? This is part of the answer.
So, going back to NIBS for a second, is agent trustworthiness an area where NIBS or another industry body should establish some common guidance?
I would say, NIBS is very good at, yes, like publishing guidance and sort of like baseline standards. Not code so much. That was handed over to ICC when they were put in place in the 90s. But that was kind of like the foundation of NIBS, was to help industry get over hurdles. And a lot of times that is done through guidance. It's done through case studies. It's done through baseline frameworks and standards. Ultimately, things like the National BIM standard, for example, or the National CAD standard, are things that still live at NIBS to help things create like a layer of trust and a foundation of diving into a new technology or a new set of innovation. So I think so. What I'm interested in hearing is, what are those needs? I get to hear some of them from our government counterparts that we support, but it'd be better if we could hear that from the industry as a whole. So there might be some follow-up actions here to do to set up some convening events where we can have those conversations at NIBS. Yeah,
I like that idea. And we have a Substack where we can discuss that.
yes.
I'm going to shift over to this agents and standards and governance, and I want to think through. I want to pressure test the notion that AI agents eliminate the need for common infrastructure. And I also want to know who's governing the whole thing, or is it just the Wild West out there? Aaron, what do you think?
Well, I guess the question to ask is, what is it that's specific about industrialized construction that would require a different governance structure than every other industry? And so if AI is a technology, and it's so like if there's a standard in JPEG images that says, I'm going to load a bunch of XML into this JPEG file so that I know when the picture was taken, where it was taken, and that was a standard in this JPEG file. And when I take it out of my camera and put it into Photoshop, now I can see that same data. That's a standard. It's exchange. So would you need specialized standards for photos in the construction industry? I mean, it's a question. There's a highly sophisticated technology infrastructure that's been built out over the last, AI is not new. This is stuff that's been going on for decades. But I would say that there's a highly secure, decentralized, stable technical standards in place that allow for AI systems to work with each other in very sophisticated ways. So is that what we're trying to solve for versus trust and adoption in the industry so that the industry can make use of this layer of technology and use it to further its goals? And that may not be so much like some notion of a centralized, but I do think we're working with, for instance, University of Washington, some of those groups around, what do you do with all this data? So all this data that comes out of this, who's it for?
Yep.
So who should be able to, it should probably be held in a public trust. This should probably be a not-for-profit that's owning the exhaust of all these systems that are coming out. That's an area where we could get specific. So as people adopt AI, they can commit to providing data to this layer so everybody can learn from what's going on. So there's a lot of research that can happen now. This whole world of pre-development, there's almost no data out there. Like what's happening, what projects don't get built? What project didn't make it because it couldn't pencil, because no one could get the right number to the table? So there's a whole world of data that's just starting to emerge. So to me, that's probably the biggest opportunity, is how do we start to collectively look at that data and understand how to improve systems, how to improve adoption, how to improve quality, standards, security, et cetera. So that's an important layer. And then the other one is, again, agents and benchmarking, because agents will be used in this industry differently than they're being used in other industry. They'll have different application. And as the industry innovates, that'll become an area where we want to be able to interoperate and have systems work with each other and talk to each other. And that is a trust layer.
So how far are we away from having a active job site where we're building something with IC? Something happens on the job site, maybe weather related, who knows? And now I want to resequence how I'm going to build things. How far are we away from that happening with AI?
I would argue you have bigger players who are doing it now. So one of the folks who's been selling a lot of software into the GC industry is Palantir, right? And so their entire business model is to go in and change the entire ontology and make it all AI friendly and native. You could argue about how much that costs, and you can argue about what the results have been. I don't have enough visibility into it to really know, but that's happening today. You have large GCs who are operating in a very AI-aware way that are altering supply chains, that are altering sequences. It's happening today. But it's happening with the folks who have tens of millions of dollars to invest on completely restructuring their GC workflow, like upending the business from the bottom up.
Yeah, I want your feedback on this, but I might even say if you've got a few savvy young folks in your organization, you might be weeks away.
Sure.
To Aaron's point, you can code if you've never even coded before, or if you know sort of a minimum baseline, you can spin up agents today super cost effectively with a couple weeks of ideating and someone who's willing to try it out.
Yep.
We have an intern who built something in like 3 days, just with an idea, something that would take months 3 or 4 years ago to build from the ground up in terms of software development, takes a couple days. So I don't think it hurts to get out there and try and proof some things. As long as you have a specific use case, you can point that at something. Are you going to get the grand intelligence out of that and scale it to 90% efficiency? No, but 30%, 50% efficiency is a pretty big deal in a small area.
That's a big improvement.
Yeah. And you take Nolan's question and just say, okay, let's just say it's about weather conditions, fairly well bound,
Right.
and a certain supply chain condition. Like, absolutely, you could run an experiment on that and have an agent working, in days. That would make an adjustment.
Yeah, where I've seen, at least within the government, we've had real progress within structured data. So if it's weather that's accessible on the internet, if we've already got the data in a database that's centralized, what the huge part that I'm missing right now is the non-structured data. All the communications, all the photos that everybody takes at the job site with their phones, that's all like scattered in all these different devices, all these different locations. Eventually, we're going to get there. Right now, we can already mine the structured data, but I haven't really seen that we've made the jump to really empower the unstructured data that's out there to the level that I think will be in the future.
And I think one of your original questions was the interconnectivity, or like the thread or the pipeline across. We can call them interactions or a pipeline, but this idea that you can short circuit that through agents, I think, is very exciting. Because let's say you were to stand up an agent that watches your schedule, maybe not even analyzes. You just have a standing agent that can look at your schedule every morning and see, oh, something changed between yesterday and today. That can immediately send an alert without you telling it to. It'll immediately send an alert back to the manufacturer. Maybe they've got a receiving agent that's watching and waiting for incoming emails or messages or notifications, and it does a set of actions. Maybe it produces a revised manufacturer schedule. It sends an alert to a few leaders. It does a couple actions. Like, that can all be done in a matter of a couple weeks in just that very simple use case.
Technology's there.
Yeah.
Excellent. So I want to get to the minimum viable trusted AI layer, because this is about like, what will it take for us to move forward with AI in an effective way? And it sounds to me from the implementation perspective that that's actually somewhat trivial. Am I? Well, before I jumped on
Not
that.
trivial. It's not trivial. It's completely technically possible. I think the big layer that people get hung up on, which is solvable technically, is proprietary data and information. So I have a business, I've developed IP, I've developed documents, I have ways of doing things. I don't want to train the public models on my system. It's not necessarily very easy for someone who's just getting into it to understand, like, where does that happen? Why does that happen? When do I lose control of this? Contractually, am I using a system that's going to, compromise my IP? That's a major valid concern. Mm-hmm. So technically, it's not difficult to solve, but it doesn't mean that it's easy to understand where the lines are. And so, for instance, you have things like, you have agents, you have instructions, you have harnesses. Harnesses are the layers that allow you to do coordination. You have knowledge bases. Knowledge bases are typically based on a RAG, which is a vector database, which allows you to store documents. You can do all of that and not talk to any public models about stuff. At some point, though, you're going to talk to a model, because the models are amazing. And the models, from a reasoning perspective, are out of this world in terms of how good they are. Contractually, when you talk to a reasoning model, are you training the model, or are you just using the model? And contractually, that's a simple question to try to address, because you can do it through contract, through licensing, and the answer is either yes or no, right? In the model and in the architecture that you've developed, are you going to be training a public model based on your business? Because I will tell you, a lot of folks in Silicon Valley, this happened years ago with other businesses I won't name, they're looking at what's happening in the models. And they're looking for opportunities to expand their IP and their business. And so it's a valid concern. Are you training public models with your data?
Mm-hmm. And so these days, aren't most people on business accounts? And are you talking about the business accounts where they pledge they're not going to train on your data? Those are safe? Is that what you're saying? Or you're saying that's not safe? Read
the fine print. I mean, you got to read what the contract says. I don't know. They all say the same thing. I mean, all I know is there's a window of time. The industry at this moment has the time to understand AI and learn how to build its own software. If it waits, it's going to wait for the tech industry to come and tell it what to do. And so you can kind of decide. And so the industry, you can already see it happening. Like if you've got an enterprise account with Microsoft, or you've got an enterprise Google account, here's the AI solution, just give licenses to all your people. Now everybody's got AI. But do they have? Do they have tools to build things? Do they have tools to make? I mean, it's just are you an AI consumer, or are you building AI for your business? Those are just very different things.
Franklin, what do you, to the extent that you could talk about it, what are the AI challenges that are the most exciting for you to solve with it, from your perspective?
Oh, wow. Yeah, so I really see it transforming a lot of what we do. I mean, and talk about near term versus long term. Data security is a big thing, because obviously in the federal government we have a lot of information that we just don't want out. We don't want the models trained on. So by and far, largely lately, we work to silo the platforms and not let them back to their source company what they've learned from the information we have inside the federal government. But I really see the possibility that it's definitely going to automate, and it's going to be able to synthesize data much better than large amounts of data that we don't currently do. Typically, we go on experience and instinct. And so I think AI is going to help give us more definition and guidance on those large amounts of data that will help us have a holistic look, instead of just based on the projects that a particular individuals live through. So we'll be able to look at those things holistically to make the goal is better choices, faster choices with better information. There's still going to be some ambiguity, and that's where generative AI really helps to connect the data to a deterministic response, so a statistical, because a lot of times there's no perfect answer, right? A lot of times it's judgment, experience, but then having the human who's validating the results, looking at the logic used and the information that's been leveraged. But some of the things that I think we really see as helping, particularly for IC, is taking some of our existing designs, because we have thousands, hundreds of thousands of projects, and what elements in those designs can be industrializable. I think right now, based, industry, we're going through a dynamic change, and right now we're basing it on experience and instinct, our human gut feel. But I think AI is really going to enable us to analyze projects or portions of projects to see what's industrializable and how, and compare it to catalog. The previous panel talked about they've got standing designs on the shelf. So do we really need a room that is a different size, that's a 1 inch or 1 foot different size? We might, and we'll pay for it. Or can we accept their standing design that's already there? I think AI is going to help us enable that and mine that data faster than a person can do within a reasonable time frame. And then also tracking the results. So as we postulate that it's going to save 20%, 40%, whatever number we pick, over time, do we actually see those savings, and why? Is it on-site cost? Is it supporting facilities? Is it the modules? Did we change something in the module so they're kind of screwed up the factory? Like, all those questions I think are going to be tracked, and if we have the data available and accessible, that will help us make decisions or stop changing things, enable to achieve optimal cost savings in the future and reduce our process. So we're going to have several parties, legally, contractually, that we're going to be connected, but our data, we need to figure out how to share it and leverage it. So to your point, you called it plumbing, but there's got to be some kind of protocol and allowability that we can share that data together and use it for our different purposes. So that's one of the opportunities I really see coming in the near future.
Awesome. I'll ask the same to Jay.
Sure. There's so many things. I think 5 or 6 went through my head. Maybe I'll pick the one that is like NIBS focused, which is along the lines of standards, recommendations, findings, and guidance. So I'm excited about AI's ability to help us generate really good guidance, to help us grind through what might be hundreds or thousands of pages of standards and help us get rid of the stuff that's just redundant or in the way, or analyze those for things that are creating cost issues in the market. We host all the military's UFCs and their guide specs. So we're already doing work around how do we analyze that from a sort of like a data line-by-line level for inefficiencies. But being able to do that on everything we produce creates efficiency, it gives us better quality, it aligns better to market and better to the industry. So I'm excited for that.
Thanks. And Aaron?
Most excited to put the tools of agent creation into the hands of people who know what they're doing. And so, we focus on 3 things. Let's make it really easy for folks to create and train really high-value agents. Let's make it really easy for them to connect them to other agents and tools to do business. And then let's make it very easy for them to make them available to their clients, partners, other parts of their ecosystem. So going from making an agent to working with the public, your customers, other folks to actually do business with that agent, that's how I feel I'm most excited about. And I will say, for this conference, what's really interesting is when you take industrialized construction and you take building systems and you map building systems towards development programs, finance, land, et cetera, building systems do way better than traditional process. Building systems are known. They have engineering characteristics. They have specifications. I can take a parcel, and if I understand the zoning constraints and I understand the finance constraints and I understand how the parcel is going to cash flow, which is how the developer looks at it, and I have available building systems that I can look at and say which one of these map onto this opportunity the best, that's a challenge that's fantastic for AI. If my question is, what should I build here? That's a different start point. So for this industry, AI is a fantastic partner because AI understands how to map building systems to development programs.
Excellent. Thanks.
Can I ask you a question? You had mentioned, and I think we talked about this in the last session too, is that most of the building industry is small teams. So how does Helix go about, or how do you think the industry or others, Helix or otherwise, would go about putting this agent building skill or capacity into the market of what is mostly small business?
Yeah, I mean, you need to make tools available for non-technical users. So you need to make it easy to use. It needs to be easy to build an agent. Right now, the chasm that we're crossing is, in most cases, if you want to build an agent, you're going to bring a software developer into the picture. If you're going to build an agent that has security, has controls, that has performance, that I understand it's, what we've done is abstracted that and say, well, no, we're going to make it really easy to build an agent. You don't need a software engineer. You don't need a technical team. That's how you cross that. So if you have a small team, it's got 10 people, they've been in business for 20 years, they deliver value. They know what they're doing. The thing that agent does is it opens up their market aperture. Suddenly they could make their services available anywhere across the country. They could be discoverable. They could be on an agent network. So I'm actually really excited by people that have real high levels of expertise, specialized expertise in the industry, because they provide a lot of value. And agents are a great way to extend the value that they can provide to the industry.
Thank you. That's awesome.
And I will say, from my point of view, the agents I've been talking about are not being coded by programmers. Most of ours are engineers, designers, construction managers that get in and build an agent. And sometimes it works and sometimes it doesn't. I'm actually curious to see, as the dust settles, like how, if you genericize the agent building to the common person,
Yep.
What are the errors, or how is it done right or wrong? And right now, I think we're in a bold new era of and this is not even like a year or two old. Like, this is within the last months, 6 months at the most. So it's a pretty exciting new time.
It's exciting, and I'll put one caveat on it, which is if you've ever built software development teams and deployed large amounts of software, a large number of folks hacking away at systems is a really fast path to technical debt.
Right. And that's what we're going to learn somehow. So, Shanti?
Well, you've got, so the ones who are doing it first are the ones who are in applied AI. So if you look at the robotics, like folks like Promise or Reframe or Cosmic, they've had to solve problems related to physical AI because they've built their businesses around the robotics being able to be flexible to do different things. So they've brought AIs, they are AI native. That's how I would view them. And as a result, they've come to the conclusion that they don't need to be bound by one single design, that they can actually be flexible every run that goes through, because they have the capability, because they're interpreting on the front end what needs to get built, and the answer to the system is, within some constraints, pretty much anything. And so we can change it up as needed, because that's a requirement of the physical AI robotics process. And so they've come to that because of the nature of the types of manufacturing that they've done.
I think the number one thing, we don't have a process, but the number one thing is defining your experiment, defining the results you're looking for, defining the input you require, whether it's prompting or the data that you expect to leverage as a part of that agent. And then, there's ways to do it. I mean, we had a class at SBC workshop on how to build an agent. A ton of people are doing it, but at this point, I mean, my message to y'all is it is super easy. Dive in. You'll do it wrong, whatever wrong is, the first time or two, and you'll see what the results are.
And there is one best practice, which is agents are best when they're very functionally specific.
Yes.
Where they have something specific to do.
Right.
If they're generalist, they're not very useful, but if they're specific, they can get very good at that one function.
Thanks, everybody. Really appreciate it.